Welcome to the Bitcoin Boomer Show. Here's your host, the Bitcoin Boomer himself, Gary Leland.
And welcome to this episode of the Bitcoin Boomer Show. Welcome to the show. I hope you enjoyed today's show. On this show, we try to talk about Bitcoin. That's why it's the Bitcoin Boomer Show. I'm a boomer. I talk about Bitcoin. It's the Bitcoin Boomer Show. The title, Bitcoin Boomer, does not mean in any way that this show is for boomers. Okay, I like to get that clear. This show is not for boomers only. This show is for anyone, including boomers, who may be interested in Bitcoin. Our total goal here is to try to educate you on Bitcoin. That's it. To teach you what Bitcoin is, to answer questions you may have about Bitcoin, but maybe you just don't know where to go to get these questions answered. So that's all we're trying to do here, is to educate you and explain to you what Bitcoin is and what the future of Bitcoin is. Now, today's guest is Michelle Weekley from Byte Federal, and Byte Federal pretty much is a ATM company that has Bitcoin ATM machines. Now, my great producer over here, Stephanie, you did the bio and did the work ahead of time. What do you think of Michelle so far, and do you have a question you want to make sure I cover and I ask her?
Yeah, I appreciate it. So from Michelle's bio that I've seen, that she's been to the Middle East, to China, and like with anything, I'm curious about the Bitcoin environment that she's experienced in those places and how it compares to the US, at least back then, whenever that happened for her, as well as right now.
Well, she's been, sounds like to me, pretty much around the world, and she's been in Bitcoin quite a while. So she has probably some, from traveling around the world, she probably has some point of views. You're right, has some point of views. Other people who basically might have stayed in the U.S. and haven't been to other places or worked with Bitcoin in other places, her views are going to be a little different, and maybe she's going to be a little more educated than the average person is on what is happening with Bitcoin and the world versus just what's happening with Bitcoin in the U.S. I'm sure since she works for a Bitcoin company in the U.S., she's going to know a lot about that. But like I said, I think it'll be enhanced by what she knows about Bitcoin and what's happening with it in the world, where it's come from, where it's going. So stay tuned till after this commercial break. We'll bring on Michelle Weekley, and we'll talk about Bitcoin. We'll talk about Byte Federal. And since today is actually Bitcoin Pizza Day, we're going to even talk about that. We'll be right back after this word from our sponsor. Stay tuned. And welcome back to the Bitcoin Boomer Show. Today is Pizza Day, and I can think of no better guest to have on our show on Pizza Day, Bitcoin Pizza Day, than Michelle Weekley, the Director of Product Development at Byte Federal. Michelle, welcome to the show and happy Bitcoin Pizza Day.
Happy Bitcoin Pizza Day, Gary. Great to be here with you.
It's nice to see you. We haven't talked in, I don't know if we've talked since Vegas. I know we did some, what was that we did on the street?
We did the zip lining over the Vegas Strip, which was awesome.
That was awesome. We had a big group. We had Miss El Salvador in our group. We had a big group.
Yeah, there were a lot of people. It was awesome.
I thought that was kind of funny. You know, this is kind of getting off subject, but I don't care. I'm just talking now. That was kind of funny. We're all zip lining, and everybody's wearing their jeans or comfortable clothes, and Miss El Salvador's all dressed up with a fancy fur coat on, and that was really kind of funny. I mean, you know, because she was overdressed.
That zip line looked good.
She did make that zip line look good. But as I said, today is Bitcoin Pizza Day. Before we go on, real quick. You think you can, since I mentioned that, you think you can go over in like a minute or two what Bitcoin Pizza Day is, since you've eaten pizza on Bitcoin Pizza Day and I have not?
Yeah, I also, by the way, regularly buy pizza with Bitcoin. Here in Florida, one of our beta testing merchants for our merchant program is a pizza shop. So I go there more than I should, and I buy pizza. But Bitcoin Pizza Day is a celebration of one of the first transactions. I believe someone paid 10,000 Bitcoins for a pizza, Laszlo, and I think it was here in Florida, actually. I have to double check what year it was. But yeah, one of the very first transactions. And I just read on Twitter, on X, somebody said, celebrate that someone paid for pizza with Bitcoin, but also celebrate that someone accepted Bitcoin for that transaction, which I think is an important point.
Yeah, that's a valid point.
And really relevant to like what's happening now.
That's a really valid point. I think you're right, though, that it is in Miami, or it is in Florida. I think Miami for some reason. We've had Pete Rizzo on the show before, and Pete told me, I don't know if you were aware of this, because we talked about this on the show, that Laszlo bought pizzas more than once with Bitcoin.
Oh.
It wasn't like he just did it one time and said, oh, there's $10,000. He did it several times. According to Pete, so that guy must have had some Bitcoin if he's buying pizzas, more than once for $10,000. So, but that's a crazy story. $10,000. How much is that in today's terms? $70 million for a pizza or something?
Yeah,
it's a lot of money. Hey, before we go any further, though, give us a little short bio on yourself. Sorry, I kind of did that off cue, but I thought we should make a special announcement for Bitcoin Pizza Day. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So I am currently the director of product development at Byte Federal, which is one of the original Bitcoin ATM companies. I spent 10 years in Washington, D.C. working for tech startups, and I didn't want to go to Silicon Valley, so I went to Dubai. And while I was living in Dubai, I was working for a startup incubator there. I was at the, right time, right place. You could say wrong time, wrong place. But I got recruited to work in foreign direct investment, which I didn't know anything about, really had no business working in that ecosystem. Ended up with a job anyway, and learned that foreign direct investment is the ecosystem that surrounds and supports the World Economic Forum and a lot of the, sovereign level investment and trade that you see happening globally. So I did that for just about 2 years and had a really, really inside view. I was kind of like a fly on the wall to all of the corruption and wild things that you hear about happening. So that ultimately led me to Bitcoin. And, eventually I burnt out of that really intensely, came back to the United States in 2018, sort of retired to Florida, and was just kind of licking my wounds, trying to figure out what to do with my life. I was doing some consulting, and then 2020 happened. And 2020 really, so I got into Bitcoin in 2017 while I was working in foreign direct investment. And like a lot of people, I spent some time trading altcoins and just kind of coming to understand really deeply. And then 2020, and it wasn't until about 2022 that I started getting involved more actively in the events and in the real world with Bitcoin, outside of my own little circle. So that led me to all the great relationships that I have now, to the job that I have doing product development, and I'm super excited.
So, you've traveled, or seemed to me from looking at your bio, seem to have lived pretty much all over the world. I mean, you were in China, you were in Dubai. Has that given you any insight that might be different than someone who's just been in the U.S. all the time about Bitcoin?
Yeah, I think so. I think, more specifically about the world, but the more that you understand the world, I think the more that you can understand Bitcoin and how truly necessary it is. I get a lot of slack for talking about freedom of speech, and comparing it to the experiences that I had in very different places around the world, like Dubai and China. And that, the observations that I have and the views that I have, I don't express that lightly. And a lot of people get really frustrated about the comparisons that I make. But I'll tell you, when I came back to the US in 2018, I didn't recognize anything that was around me. And that was really, really shocking. So I think that led me to really explore a lot of the topics that we talk about all the time in Bitcoin, some of the macro level topics, freedom of speech, the freedom to transact, what is money, all of these things. That a deep understanding of these things will really lead you to deeply understand the necessity of Bitcoin, why it was created, and why we're all here evangelizing it all the time.
So I could see where that would definitely give you a different thought pattern and make things different in how relative they are to you. But I think that if you'd waited to now to come back, you really wouldn't recognize anything.
Yeah.
If you thought it was unrecognizable when you came back. How did you actually find Bitcoin? What was your orange pill moment in 2 minutes or less?
Sure. So it was orange pilled first. I was in Cartagena, Colombia at some strange global conference, and this little Russian kid who was working on one of the first Bitcoin wallets, was called Mycelium, started telling me all about it. And he was excited about Bitcoin and Ethereum. And I went home and looked it all up and started studying everything. And over the next, I spent several years studying it from like a tech perspective. And after I came to the States, actually, and realized how much had changed, is what started to orange pill me and turn me into a Bitcoin maxi.
So it was just, I could see how easily that would happen, though. I find that people, when they first go down the rabbit hole, are so excited and so pumped because this is so new, and they think they're helping save the world by telling everybody about it. And then you kind of like, after you go through a halving or so, you kind of get hardened to it, and you're like, it's another halving. Yeah, it's going to save the world, but I'm tired of telling people that it's going to save the world. Right. But you change your kind of thought pattern on that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that has definitely happened to me. In fact, I've jokingly said, I'm not going to orange pill anyone anymore. I'm just going to tell them if they don't think that Bitcoin is for them, then that's okay. And they can give me a call when it hits 100,000, and I'll answer any questions that they may have at that time.
That's kind of funny. January the 1st on my Facebook page, I posted, I'm not going to talk about Bitcoin again till it hits 100,000. Which should be by Christmas, is what I posted, and I got all these like, "Oh, you're really damn optimistic, aren't you?" or things like that. So it's funny, we almost did the same exact thing. Hey, we're going to take a break for a word from our sponsor, and we'll be right back with Michelle Weekley. Like I said, right after this word. Stay. And welcome back to the Bitcoin Boomer Show. Today, joined by Michelle Weekley, my ziplining buddy from Vegas. Michelle, tell us a little bit about Byte Federal. Let's get into that and find out what Byte Federal is.
Sure. So Byte Federal is one of the first Bitcoin ATM companies. They started in 2016 right here in Florida, and we assemble the ATMs in our own warehouse here in Florida. We have written all of the code that runs the machines, and we do everything to maintain the network. So it's all Florida, American made, American run, and Byte Federal really has become a software development company. We have a pretty significant software team, the team that wrote the code that runs the machines. And we've also developed a merchant payment system. So we've been beta testing that, working on deploying that. We're a fully licensed MSB. So there's a lot of things happening in the US regulatorily. And unfortunately, I am at the forefront of that. So we also have a non-custodial Bitcoin wallet. It is Lightning enabled. So you can check that out. We just did a redesign and rebrand of that. Hopefully it's working well now. So we have a whole ecosystem of tools that enable people to easily access and use their Bitcoin. And I work with a bunch of freedom-loving libertarians, people who have fled communism. And it's great. I love it. I'm really, really thankful.
One of the questions I have about ATMs in particular is, do you not have a concern? I'm not saying you should have a concern. I'm saying, is there a concern that the federal government's going to try to get rid of ATMs? I mean, they're
Absolutely.
They got rid of Binance. I mean, they're getting rid of everything. It looks like to me. I see wallets disappearing. IBEX is gone out of the U.S. now. This is happening more and more. Is that a concern, and is it a real concern, I guess?
Absolutely. It's not only a real concern, I think it's actually a much more significant concern than people are aware of. There's a lot of things happening that unfortunately I'm not allowed to speak publicly about. I will say, one of the things that I learned over the past year since I took the job was the things that I learned in my government-sponsored KYC AML training. And again, there's things I can't discuss, but they're very concerning. People online are talking about, are these sort of individual cases where the samurai guys were kind of running their mouths and, oh, we don't care about Tornado Cash because it was Ethereum. And, I think it's easy, or it has been easy, to kind of write off a number of these regulatory crackdowns, but I would encourage people not to write them off and to really see it for the pattern that it is. It's really an assault on the industry. I understand completely why a lot of the companies have left. We are in the fortunate position to be fully licensed, and we believe that we're fully compliant, and so that we hope to be able to continue to provide products and services. But we're absolutely looking at diversifying geographically. So we're going to expand down to El Salvador, and we're likely going to expand over to Dubai. And, we hope that is part of the business, and we don't have to pivot so that that's all of the business. But it's certainly a significant concern. The U.S. is absolutely after the entire industry, and it's something that Bitcoiners need to pay attention to. A lot of people like to say, oh, Bitcoin doesn't care. And I understand that. I agree categorically that Bitcoin doesn't care, and Bitcoin will survive regardless of you or the United States or your favorite product or service. But if you want ease of access, if you want to be able to get to your Bitcoin, without having a degree in computer science, then we need to save the ability for Bitcoiners in the U.S. to build.
Do you see this as something being, and I'm not trying to get you, if I ask you a question during this that you aren't supposed to answer, that's fine. Just say I can't answer that. But do you see it as a attack based more on the fact that we have big companies now getting into Bitcoin? I mean, something that everybody's worried about, but all of a sudden, BlackRock, Fidelity, banks is going through the process now, making it so banks can hold Bitcoin. All of a sudden, the people with the money are getting involved in Bitcoin, and it seems like all the attacks on the Bitcoin existing infrastructure are happening more than before. Do you think that's there's 2 + 2 there equaling 4, I guess, basically? That has something to do with it?
I think that they're related. The relationship that I see is that they're attacking everything that they don't want to exist. So the really great pieces of Bitcoin and the Bitcoin ecosystem that we all champion and love, those are the things they're going after. And what they want, what I believe their end goal is just to have all Bitcoin KYC'd, subject to their AML restrictions, and also to just have qualified custodians. So they've allowed the large participants to come in, and this enables them to say, well, we're not banning Bitcoin. You can buy the ETF, or you can buy your Bitcoin on Coinbase and keep it there. I'm not a fan of Coinbase, obviously, but it's a great example. I think their goal is to have absolute and complete transparency, and ultimately to have control by ensuring that Americans are only able, short of things that they deem not legal, ways around. Of course, there's always going to be technical ways around the things they don't want you to do, right? But they just want everyone to hold their Bitcoin with a qualified custodian. And what you see is them cracking down on the tools that make it easier for people to be doing something other than that. In other words, having their own keys, having any type of privacy. We're not there yet where they've cracked down on your own keys, but I believe that they're coming for it. And if they're not stopped, that it's very likely to happen.
So I don't understand how that would fall into play for, I don't understand how that would even fall into play, because the world's a big place. I know sometimes it seems like a small place, but how are you going to go to El Salvador and tell everybody down there they can't control their own keys?
Well, they're not. I'm talking about American citizens. So from and certainly they've already driven a lot of companies and people, smart, talented people. They've driven them out of the U.S. They've driven them away from doing business in the U.S. and from providing their services. Phoenix Wallet, for example, was a great wallet. We saw Wallet of Satoshi leave first, and then and everyone kind of said, oh, use Phoenix. Phoenix is great. Well, now Phoenix has left. So really, I'm talking about the U.S. I think we are seeing regulation come in other countries, and we're also seeing other countries at the opposite end of the spectrum where they're embracing Bitcoin. And I believe on a long enough time frame, we're really going to see a total realignment geopolitically, and that one of the primary drivers of that is going to have been whether a country adopted and embraced Bitcoin or regulated it into oblivion and tried to tell its citizens, that they can't have access or that their access is limited.
Well, haven't we seen limited access from China with their citizens? And that didn't seem to do too much damage to Bitcoin. Actually, I think Bitcoin grew.
Right, but it's damaging to people who are citizens of China, right? And who can't leave. And I don't want we're comparing American citizens and their ability to access the Bitcoin network to the limitations put on Chinese citizens, right? So even the fact that we're making that comparison should be alarming to people. So no, Bitcoin doesn't care, but I care about Bitcoiners, and a lot of them are American citizens. And so they can label us criminals, but I don't think that most of us want to go to jail for interacting with the Bitcoin network.
Right.
We want to live our lives.
Exactly. Okay, we're going to take another break for a word from our sponsor, and we'll be right back with Michelle Weekley. And welcome back to the Bitcoin Boomer Show. I'm your host, Gary Leland. This show, basically, we just try to talk about Bitcoin. That's all we do. We're not trying to sell you any Bitcoin. We're not trying to, I don't have any Bitcoin I want to sell you, first of all. So we're not trying to sell you Bitcoin, but we want to educate you enough so that you know what Bitcoin is. And maybe you'll get orange pilled in the meantime. Today's guest is Michelle Weekley with Byte Federal. Welcome back to the show, Michelle. We were just talking about ATMs. We're talking about how the country is starting to get attacking Bitcoin infrastructures, I guess basically is a way to put it. Do you see, a question I've had about this, since Samurai Wallet's gone, things like this are happening, are we going to see a bigger attack, you think, on Bitcoin washing sites?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I just see that as and then my question is, okay, so if you have Bitcoin and you've, gone through the process, washing it, are you going to have a hard time being able to get rid of it anywhere or move it or something? Or, let's say, well, I guess they could say you can't upload it and cash it out at any exchange, because it'd be a way to identify that, I would think, in the transaction history or something. Am I on the right track, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I will say we'll be lucky if the attack on the industry is limited to mixing services. We've seen that happening for quite some time. There's a number of cases, and I think they've made it very clear that this is something that's unacceptable to them. How much further it goes remains to be seen, but it's absolutely a concern, and it's something that I wish more people were fighting for. There is a coordinated attack on Bitcoin and the Bitcoin industry, and it must be stopped.
Well, good enough. Hey, let's go back to Byte Federal for a minute. I went to the site, I come in and I do my pre-work for the show, and I go to Byte Federal, and bam, up on the screen pops an ATM about 1.5 miles from here. I didn't know that ATM was there, so I thought that was pretty cool. And a couple of things about the Byte Federal. Number one, I see that it has like Litecoin on there. So do a lot of people buy Litecoin on the ATM machine? Do a lot of people even buy Litecoin? But do a lot of people buy Litecoin on your ATM machines?
Not a lot. I think one day you'll see Byte Federal be a Bitcoin-only business. I will say the people that we see using Litecoin do so when the Bitcoin fees are really high. And we see a lot of people who have the need to send, for example, one of our developers, to be honest, uses Litecoin sometimes to send his family money home down in Argentina. And they just use it, they cash it out and go buy groceries. So that's one of the reasons that we're focused really, really seriously on layer two protocols on top of Bitcoin, so that we don't have to continue with that nonsense. And, you can use Lightning, eCash, Liquid, some of these other protocols that are being developed and getting easier and easier and better, easier and easier to use and better to implement. Every few weeks, there's significant improvements, and that enables people like us to integrate those protocols into our networks and makes the rest of it useless, as we know that it ultimately is.
Well, speaking of, since you brought it up, Lightning, I noticed on the wallet that it looks like in the wallet I can convert Bitcoin to Lightning, and I guess from Lightning to Bitcoin. There aren't a lot of wallets that do that, is there? Because I was hunting for a wallet a couple of weeks ago to do that, and all I found was I can't even think. Jason Mao's wallet that has
Aqua.
Aqua. That was like one of the few that I could find that do that. So is that hard of a thing to do? Y'all do it, they do it, or is it just most people just don't go through the trouble of figuring it out to put it on their wallet?
It's both, to be honest. It's not super easy to implement, and there's a lot of challenges. Because of the ATM network, we run a number of Bitcoin nodes. We hold a lot of Bitcoin, and then we run our own Lightning channels, and everything is really done in-house. But we have a significant team, a team of developers. We're a pretty large company, and so we have those resources. But if you're just a developer, maybe you're a team of 2 or 3, and you're trying to create a really awesome wallet, which we've seen a lot of people put great wallets out, you may not have all of those resources. So yeah, it's, I think it's both.
Doesn't, getting back to what we were talking about earlier with the government not liking certain things like mixing services and stuff, when you turn Bitcoin into Lightning and send it somewhere and they turn it back into Bitcoin, isn't that almost like washing it? I know it's not technically, but isn't the finished product almost the same thing?
Yes, it is. And let's not advertise that, right?
Well, it just dawned on me. I never thought of it before. I just all of a sudden it dawned on me going, I think that's going to end up being the same thing.
Yeah, you're not wrong. And that, I think, is unfortunately going to be the next challenge that we face. I have way more conversations than I want to be having about Lightning, and not about Lightning like, does it work? It works, right? It works great. We buy pizza with it, and I can buy gasoline with it. All of our merchants are using it. But the conversations, unfortunately, that we're having right now are related to regulation and licensing and money transmission licenses and all of this nonsense that I never wanted to be an expert in, but unfortunately have learned a lot about.
Yeah, I could see where there's a lot going on there, and a lot to to learn about that. I didn't realize I was so accurate on my my thought there, because I could just see that being a mess later. So do we have a concern 5 years down the road that if Bitcoin's gone through Lightning, it's just like washing it? You can't get rid of it anywhere. What happens if they shut down all the exit ramps? I mean, to cash out your Bitcoin. I know my Bitcoin's still good, but there'll be a point in time where people want to buy something that they have to pay cash for, and maybe they're Bitcoin poor. I mean, that's a term I heard at BitBlock Boom. Someone who has a lot of Bitcoin, but they got no money, and they told me they were tired of being Bitcoin poor. They're worth a lot. They just don't want to cash it in because they know they'll be worth a lot more. So, what happens to those people?
Well, I think ultimately, I hope that we live in a world where we've built enough of a parallel ecosystem that those people are not poor and that they can use their Bitcoin to buy and purchase and trade for the products, services, and values that they need. We see more and more of these things happening all the time. You can buy steak, you can buy a half of a cow, you can buy gasoline, you can buy the more merchants and the more pieces of the ecosystem that get rebuilt within the Bitcoin ecosystem, the less need that those people will have for dollars. So it's kind of, this race against time as we are working really hard to build these alternative options. We're also getting the pushback and the crackdown. I think people do need to sort of game theory out for themselves. What time frame might you need access to your Bitcoin? And if you do, I tell people, especially now, coming in now, Bitcoin, you have to think of Bitcoin as like a savings account for now. You have to be prepared to hold, right? And a lot of us understand this, but a lot of people haven't thought through the implications of that. So I think if you have Bitcoin, I think it's smart to diversify your Bitcoin holdings. You have some Bitcoin that you're not ever going to need to touch for 10 plus years. And there's a setup for that. And then maybe there's a small amount of Bitcoin that you think that you might need access to. So you're not in this situation, right, where you need cash and don't have access to it. And perhaps that needs to be held in a different way. And then I look at Lightning as kind of like the cash in your pocket, right? So your daily spending cash, go to the bank to prepare to get our cash out. Same thing with Lightning.
Good enough. Well, we'll be right back. More conversation with Michelle Weekley. Stay tuned. After this word from our sponsor, we'll be here. And welcome back to the Bitcoin Boomer Show. I'm Gary Leland. Today I'm joined by Michelle Weekley of Byte Federal. Okay, Michelle, we've been going on a lot of different things here. I want to know more about Byte Connect right now. I know basically what it is, but could you go into that in a little more detail? Because y'all seem to be doing a lot to me. I mean, you got the ATMs, you got the wallets, you got the Connect. So let's go into Connect real quick.
Yeah, so this is our merchant payment processing system. It enables merchants to accept Bitcoin and Lightning payments. And there's a physical point of sale device. So this is obviously for stores and retail locations. We have a lot of our merchants that have ATMs who, people are coming to their business to buy Bitcoin and they'd like for those people to be able to spend the Bitcoin. So this is a solution for them. We also have an online payment gateway that enables people to use to accept Bitcoin, online. There's a number of e-commerce solutions there. And we also have had a lot of interest from the real estate community. So we are working on a tool specifically to meet the demand that's there as well. So there's a lot of demand out there for merchant solutions within the Bitcoin ecosystem, and we're trying to meet that demand. It's challenging to do so, and when I say challenging, I mean from a regulatory perspective. We're trying to not get shut down, and we're trying to make sure our merchants can do what they want to do and not get in trouble for it.
So you guys are basically, not only do you have retail store usage in retail stores, but people could use you as a replacement for IBEX. Are you picking up much business from IBEX pulling out of the U.S.?
Yeah, so we are looking very closely. We thought that we were fully regulated, licensed and regulated appropriately. We're looking at, based on the recent regulatory crackdowns and decisions that have been made, we're kind of reevaluating everything and making sure that we do, in fact, hold the correct licensing to facilitate everything that we're doing. And of course, it's a challenge because the interpretations of those laws are continually being changed, are being reinterpreted and applied in different ways. So it's not an easy thing to do. But yes, if anyone was using IBEX, they are welcome to reach out, and we will do everything we can to help re-meet their needs.
Yeah, that was, I think IBEX has 8 more days or 9 more days in the U.S. until they're gone. So I would think there are a lot of people scrambling right now trying to figure out what they're going to use in the next 8 or 9 days. I mean, they're going to have to switch to something. And I don't feel like there's a ton of Lightning-enabled products for online stores. Am I right, or is there a lot more than I think?
Yeah.
And I've just been kind of in a tunnel.
Yeah, no, there's not a lot of solutions. The regulators have made it clear that they want people facilitating Lightning payments to be heavily licensed as money service providers, and even possibly to have MTLs. So that's very complex and expensive to meet those regulatory requirements. And so unfortunately, there are not a lot of people able to meet those requirements. I'm hoping that the interpretation changes and that we get some pushback and some fight against the new interpretation of the laws that have been on the books, but that remains to be seen.
Yeah, there's a lot of things I wish would be reinterpreted for the laws that are on the books. And so the question is Bitcoin money?
I believe that Bitcoin is money. I believe it's a store of value. And, when we are storing our value, we always have the option to trade that for goods and services, right? So ultimately, that's money. So to me.
So it's sound money, I guess, basically, compared to. Yeah. Do we have any other sound money around, of anything anywhere in the world? Is there any other sound money in the world? I mean, I don't think anyone uses the gold standard anywhere.
No.
And it's been, since I was in 10th grade, they took the dollar off the gold standard. And I believe that was originally just going to be for a few days.
Oh, yeah. Nothing more permanent than an emergency act.
Yeah, and usually the emergency act is named something like Save the Kids or something.
Yeah.
Or Liberty.
Exactly.
The word liberty's got to be in there, too.
Right.
So
Freedoms.
it's got the word kids, freedom, liberty in there.
Safety.
Huh? What was
safety. Don't forget safety.
Yeah, the Safety Act. Yeah, it's funny how they always name those ones that take away our rights, and they name them things that we would be in favor of normally. I think that's. Right. I guess that's because most people in the Senate and Congress don't read any of that thing, and they go, "Oh, this is the Safety Act. Everybody wants safety." So,
right.
So, anything else that you particularly want to cover? We got 4 minutes left before we get out of here that I might not have gone over. I want to make sure that I get everything, and we don't get through and you go, I can't believe you didn't ask me this.
No, I love talking to you. It's been great talking with you. My main sort of message really has never intended for it to be, but my message has become for people to speak up and to speak out against the things that they see. Unfortunately, a lot of people are scared to speak up, and this leads to like a quiet compliance. And I'm hoping that we can stop that. Otherwise, we're just going to quietly comply into the next emergency or pandemic or whatever nonsense they come up with. So, don't be afraid to speak up. And to be honest, you don't have to be loud and crazy about it. Just be honest with the friends and family and your local community and the people in your life. And let's go back to a time where, we can disagree about things and just have like polite discourse where we agree, but we're challenging the thoughts and opinions of people, and, not just trusting the science or trusting the experts. I mean, that's nonsense that has been enabled by people being quiet and being too nervous or too afraid to speak up. So I implore everyone to please speak up and be honest about what they really think about the nonsense that's going on around them.
Well, I find people to be, for the most part, like sheep or cattle. We like to follow the herd. And I guess every once in a while in the cattle world, you get that maverick bull that gets out there and that says, I'm not following the rest of you guys. I'm going to do my own deal. But for the most part, 99% of that herd moves the same direction. If one goes towards the mountains, they all go towards the mountains. So I find people to be like that. I always have felt that way. Before we go, tell people where they can follow you, find you, any pertinent links.
I'm on Twitter. I guess it's X now, but that's the only place that I am. You can find me right there. I only have one profile. I do have a blue check because if you don't pay for the product, you are the product. So I like to think, Elon's trying to do the right thing there. And I'm at a lot of the conferences, of course, BitBlock Boom. The next conference I'll be at will be in Prague. So if you're in Prague, I'd love to see you at the event. If you're anywhere in Europe, and come say hi. I'd love to meet you all. I love Bitcoiners and everybody in Bitcoin.
Well, Bitcoiners do have their own thought patterns. Most Bitcoiners, if you took a lot of social groups and you made Bitcoiners a social group compared to a lot of other ones, I think you'd find less people in the herd. That are willing to do their own thing and don't give a damn what's going on anywhere else. They're going to follow their own road, their own path, and I think that's what.
And you're one of them.
Oh, thank you very much. I think you are too. But I find that's one of the things that helps create Bitcoiners, people who are used to doing their own deal and don't care about anyone else's and don't follow the herd, have more of a chance of becoming a Bitcoiner or a Bitcoin maximalist. For sure.
I agree.
Well, I appreciate you coming on the show, and I look forward to seeing you, I guess, in Nashville will be the next place I see you, and we'll have to get together and talk there, but hopefully we see each other quite a bit. But thanks again for coming on the show, and have a good one.
Thanks, Gary. Thanks so much for having me. It was great to talk with you, and I look forward to seeing you in the real world again soon.
In the real world again, zoo. I don't think I'm going ziplining again. I think once was enough, but we'll see you soon. And we'll be right back after this word from our sponsor. Welcome back to the Bitcoin Boomer Show. I hope you've enjoyed today's interview with Michelle Weekley. I thought that was. We covered a few things we've never covered before. I believe we've had someone on. Stephanie, am I correct? We've had someone on before that was involved in the ATM world, didn't we?
Yeah, we've had ATMs. I can't think of their company name right now, but you're right.
Yeah, same thing. I just know we've had that conversation before, but not this conversation, but we've talked about ATMs.
Right.
What'd you think of today's guest?
Michelle is great. I liked learning from what she said about. She said and didn't say. It was like specific but vague. It was very well done in terms of as a Bitcoin business, what that's like to be in compliance and make sure they're all on the I don't know what the word was, regulatory compliance stuff, like how hard that can be and ongoing in the current policy U.S. environment right now.
Yes,
so that was cool to hear.
I think you've got a good point. She had a good point. It's very hard right now in the U.S. to be compliant. That's why, as we said during the show, several companies are moving out of the U.S. Or maybe they're out of the U.S. and they're just cutting off the U.S. and they're not doing business in the U.S. anymore. I truly believe that it's because of the big banks and ETFs that are getting into Bitcoin right now. They are not wanting any of these people who've been developing these competitors to be around. down. And basically, let's face it, the competitors that are here that have been building stuff for the last 5 to 10 years don't have a lot of power in Congress and Senate and the SEC and the Finance Committee. So I kind of believe to a point that that's what's happening, is it's kind of like a cleanup deal. Let's get this all cleaned up so that the big banks can take it over. Hey, before we end the show, I do want to tell you about a few things. Make sure and visit bitblockboom.com. That's our Bitcoin conference that we host in Dallas, Texas. That's at bitblockboom.com. And make sure and check out the book I helped write, Bitcoin and the American Dream. You can find that at bitblockboom.com/books. It looks like I'm messing up the day big time. Also, make sure and check out our monthly meetup at meetups.com/bitblockboom. That's meetups.com/bitblockboom. We do a barbecue meetup usually every month. It's a great time. Make sure and follow me on Twitter. I'm Gary Leland on Twitter and also BitBlockBoom, but Gary Leland is my personal account on Twitter. And make sure and share the show with your friends. Like I said, we're just trying to teach you about Bitcoin, not trying to sell you Bitcoin. We'll see you next week right here. Remember to stack those sats.